Imagine you are fast asleep, right? And suddenly at 3 o'clock in the morning, the smoke detector in your hallway just starts screaming.
Oh, that is the worst way to wake up.
It really is. It's that piercing, high-pitched wail that just jolts you right out of bed. I mean,
Yeah.
your heart is pounding in your throat. Your adrenaline is absolutely surging.
Yeah, you're in full fight or flight mode.
Exactly. So you sprint out to the hallway, completely expecting to see flames. But there's no fire.
Right.
There's no smoke. It turns out the sensor just caught like a tiny wisp of steam from the bathroom down the hall.
Wow. But the physical reaction you experience in your body, I mean, that's entirely real.
Oh, totally.
The racing heart, the panic.
Yeah.
But the threat itself is a complete phantom.
Now, I want you to imagine that the alarm doesn't turn off. And instead of being on your ceiling, that alarm is hardwired inside your head.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. It's firing off that exact same life or death panic response multiple times a day over entirely harmless everyday things. And that is the reality we are exploring today.
Yeah. It's a heavy topic, but such an important one.
It really is. So welcome to our deep dive. Whether you are, prepping for your day, trying to understand a loved one, or just inherently curious about how the human brain works, we are really glad you're here with us.
Absolutely.
Because today's mission is a critical one. We are examining a really fascinating clinical document. It's titled Pediatric OCD, Clinical Identification and School-Based Intervention Strategies.
And our goal today with this material is really threefold. First, we are going to completely shatter the common and frankly kind of trivializing stereotypes surrounding childhood OCD.
Yeah, those stereotypes are everywhere.
They really are. Second, we'll uncover the hidden signs that cause massive tragic delays in diagnosis. And finally, we will explore a groundbreaking school-based model down in Georgia that is fundamentally changing the landscape of pediatric mental health.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand what is happening inside the brain of a child suffering from this condition, we have to start by dismantling a very specific pop culture myth.
Right, the whole tidy kid thing.
Exactly. We hear it constantly. People say, oh, I'm so OCD about my desk being organized, or I'm such a germaphobe, I need my kitchen counter spotless.
Like it's a quirky personality trait.
Right. It gets treated like a preference. But that trivialization is precisely why this condition goes unrecognized for so long.
It really is. Because pediatric OCD is not about a preference for neatness. Clinically, it's defined by the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. And we need to be really clear about what those words actually mean in a medical context.
Yeah, because we misuse them all the time.
We do. So obsessions are intrusive, highly unwanted thoughts, images, or urges that cause severe, debilitating distress.
They are pleasant.
Not at all. They aren't about liking things a certain way. They are genuinely terrifying to the child experiencing them.
And then the compulsions, right. Those are the repetitive behaviors or mental acts that the child feels utterly driven to perform.
Exactly. And they do them just to neutralize that intense distress. It's a survival mechanism to them.
And the text points out that to even qualify clinically, this whole cycle has to take up 1 or more hours a day.
Minimum.
Right. And it has to severely impact the child's school, family, or social life. I mean, it is essentially hijacking their day.
Completely hijacking it.
And the sources outline specific themes that go way beyond the stereotypical hand washing. I mean, yes, contamination and germs are common themes,
Yeah.
but there are also harm and safety obsessions. The text gives a chilling, very real example. It says, if I don't tap the door 3 times, mom will die.
That is terrifying for a kid to carry around.
It is. There's also symmetry and exactness, or religious and moral scrupulosity.
Right, where a child is terrified they've committed an unforgivable sin.
Exactly, and even taboo, intrusive thoughts that are entirely contrary to the child's actual character.
Which is so important to understand because the brain is, at its core, a pattern-matching association machine.
Right.
When a child has an intrusive thought about their mother dying, their brain experiences the same massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline as if they were literally watching her step into oncoming traffic.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the compulsion in this case, tapping the door, brings a temporary, fleeting sense of relief.
Ah, so the brain learns from that.
Exactly. The brain falsely learns a lesson. It thinks, tapping the door saved mom. So it reinforces the cycle, demanding that compulsion the next time the thought occurs.
It makes me think of, like, a glitchy brain spam filter.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know how your email filter is supposed to catch the malicious viruses and let the normal, everyday emails through? Well, in an OCD brain, the spam filter is just broken.
Right, it's flagging everything.
Yeah, it takes a completely harmless, everyday thought like accidentally brushing your arm against a school desk and accidentally flags it as a fatal, catastrophic threat.
The brain is literally shouting, danger!
And the kid is just trying to survive the alarm. But here's what I don't understand, and maybe you can help me here. If younger kids often lack the vocabulary to articulate these incredibly complex obsessions, I mean, a 7-year-old isn't going to calmly pull their teacher aside and explain their sudden onset of religious scrupulosity, right?
Definitely not.
So how on earth are adults supposed to know what's going on inside their heads?
What's fascinating here is that you don't necessarily have to see the internal thought to recognize the external distress.
Okay, so what do we look for?
Because the child cannot articulate the invisible obsession, parents and teachers basically have to become detectives of the visible behavior.
Detectives. Got it.
Yeah. And the sources highlight very specific hidden signs to watch for. And I'll tell you, they are rarely the obvious ones we've been culturally conditioned to expect.
We're talking about things like prolonged bedtime or bathroom rituals, right?
Exactly.
Like a standard 10-minute bedtime routine that suddenly stretches into 2 exhausting hours because the pillows and blankets have to be arranged just right before the child feels safe enough to close their eyes?
Yes, or repeated reassurance seeking.
Oh, like asking questions.
Right. Asking a parent, are you sure I didn't get sick? Are you sure I'm not a bad person? Over and over again. They're seeking a guarantee that no adult can ever truly provide.
Wow. But the hidden sign that really caught my eye in the text, the one that consistently catches educators off guard, is the excessive redoing of homework.
This is a huge one.
I mean, imagine a classroom setting where a student is erasing their math worksheet over and over again until the paper literally tears.
Right. And to a teacher, that just looks like a high achiever.
Exactly. It looks like standard perfectionism.
But the key differentiator between a perfectionist trait and a clinical OCD compulsion is the level of intense, explosive distress when that ritual is interrupted.
That makes so much sense, because if a kid is just a perfectionist and the teacher says, time is up, hand in your paper, the kid might get, frustrated or disappointed.
Right, they might pout.
But if a child is in the middle of an OCD compulsion, interrupting them feels, to their glitching spam filter, like you are condemning them to whatever catastrophic event they're trying to prevent.
Yes, the panic is absolute. It's entirely disproportionate to the situation.
And while this might sound like a rare phenomenon, the sources note that about 1 to 3% of children and adolescents have OCD.
Right, so think about the math on that. In a standard elementary school of 500 students, you're talking about 5 to 15 kids.
Wow. That is a whole classroom's worth of children in a single building.
It is. Yet, despite how common and how severe this is, it leads to what is arguably the most staggering statistic in all of our source material.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
The average diagnostic delay for pediatric OCD is 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years, that just stops you in your tracks. I mean, that is nearly a child's entire academic career.
It really is.
A kid could start experiencing this terrifying internal alarm system in 2nd grade and not get an accurate diagnosis or the right help until they're, applying for colleges.
It's a heartbreaking metric to digest.
How does a child suffer with something so debilitating for a decade without anyone stepping in to stop the cycle?
Well, the reason for this massive delay brings us to a deeply counterintuitive concept called family accommodation.
Okay, yes, I want to talk about this.
The delay happens not just because the internal thoughts are hidden from view, but because of how the child's environment naturally reacts to their visible distress.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the very thing that delays the diagnosis and prolongs the suffering is actually the adults in the room trying to be good, supportive, loving caregivers.
Exactly. Family accommodation refers to the well-intentioned ways that parents, teachers, and siblings help a child with their rituals or proactively avoid their triggers.
So, if a child is terrified of contamination,
the parent starts opening all the doors for them. Or they wash their clothes 3 times on the sanitize cycle. Or they buy them a specific requested brand of soap.
or the reassurance thing we mentioned earlier.
Right. When the child seeks reassurance, the parent provides it, saying, you're fine, you're not sick, you're a good kid, a dozen times a day.
Okay, I have to push back here. Because honestly, isn't it the most basic, natural human instinct for a parent or a teacher to want to comfort a terrified kid?
Of course it is.
I mean, If you see a child crying in absolute agony over touching a doorknob, your biological drive as a caregiver is to soothe them, to make the bad feeling go away as quickly as possible. You're telling me that comforting them is making the OCD worse.
I am, and you are entirely right that it goes against every evolutionary caregiving instinct we possess. It is deeply painful for parents to learn this in therapy.
I can't even imagine.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how the brain learns and adapts, we can understand why accommodation is so dangerous. By participating in the ritual, by opening the door for them, or giving them the repetitive reassurance they demand, you are externally validating the brain's false alarm.
Oh.
You are telling the child's amygdala, which is the brain's primitive threat detection center, you are right. That doorknob is a mortal threat, and it is a very good thing I opened it for you.
Wow. It's like putting out a grease fire with a bucket of water.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Your instinct is to douse it, to help. But by throwing water on it, you're actually just spreading the flames and making the fire bigger. You reduce their anxiety in the short term, but you guarantee that the OCD will come back stronger the next time.
Exactly. You become an unwitting cog in the compulsion machine. And this devastating realization perfectly explains why the gold standard treatment outlined in our sources is so highly specific and frankly requires an immense amount of hard work from both the child and the family.
Right, so let's get into that. The sources identify this gold standard treatment as a specific form of cognitive behavioral therapy called exposure and response prevention, or ERP.
Yes, ERP.
Let's really break down the mechanics of how this works for the listener because it sounds intense.
That can be.
So ERP helps children gradually face their feared situation, that's the exposure part, without performing the compulsion. And that's a response prevention. So let's walk through what a session might actually look like.
Okay, imagine a child whose OCD centers around a fear of contamination from dirt. In an ERP session, the therapist might start very small.
Yeah.
Perhaps just having the child look at a picture of mud.
Just a picture.
Just a picture. Over time, they work up the ladder of fears. Eventually, the therapist might have the child physically touch a smudge of dirt on a desk.
Yeah.
That is the exposure.
Okay.
Now comes the crucial part. They are not allowed to wash their hands. That is the response prevention.
And their anxiety must just skyrocket in that moment. I mean, their glitchy spam filter is screaming at them that they are going to get sick and die.
It does skyrocket. It feels genuinely terrible for the child at first.
Yeah, I bet.
But by sitting with that intense discomfort and riding out the wave of anxiety without doing the compulsion, they teach their brain a completely new empirical reality.
Right.
The brain learns, I touched the dirt, I didn't wash my hands, and the catastrophe didn't happen. The anxiety actually came down on its own. They are literally rewriting the brain's neural pathways, proving to the amygdala that the alarm is false.
Which explains why the sources stress that family involvement in ERP is absolutely essential.
Crucial.
Because a specialist can do this exposure therapy in an office for 1 hour a week, but if the parents go home and accommodate the OCD for the other 167 hours of the week by opening doors and washing clothes, the treatment is going to fail.
It will. It won't stick.
So the parents have to be trained to lovingly but firmly refuse to participate in the compulsions. That has to be an incredibly tough transition for a family.
It is. It requires completely retraining the whole family ecosystem. And it is worth noting that our sources mention therapy alone sometimes needs clinical backup.
Right, medication.
Yes. When ERP alone is insufficient because the child's distress is simply too high to even engage in the exposure, the medical route involves FDA-approved SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Now, a lot of parents understandably get very nervous at the mention of SSRIs for a child. There's this fear of over-medicating or changing a kid's personality. But looking at the literature, this isn't about drugging a kid into compliance, is it?
Not at all. The sources highlight specific medications studied for pediatric OCD, fluoxetine, sertraline, and fluvoxamine, and their purpose is purely functional.
How so?
They simply help lower the baseline volume of the anxiety. If a child's anxiety is at a constant 10 out of 10, they cannot focus on the hard work of ERP.
They're just too panicked.
Exactly. The SSRI lowers that volume to a 6 or a 7, giving the child the mental breathing room to actually practice touching the dirt and sitting with the discomfort.
That makes total sense. But, no matter how effective ERP or SSRIs are, it keeps coming back to this 8 to 10 year diagnostic delay.
That decade of waiting.
Yeah. If the biggest barrier to this treatment is finding an ERP-trained specialist and spotting those hidden signs before a decade passes and kids are spending 8 hours a day in a classroom, it begs the question,
Mhm.
why aren't we bringing the specialists to the schools?
Which brings us to the final piece of our deep dive. Schools really are the front line.
They have to be.
Right. Trained school counselors are in a unique daily position to spot these hidden OCD patterns early. The frantic erasing, the prolonged bathroom trips during recess, the constant reassurance seeking from teachers, and refer them directly to care.
And that leads us to the specific program highlighted in our sources, which is really stepping up to bridge this massive gap.
Yes.
We're looking at a program in Georgia called MentalSpace School. When you look at the structure of the MentalSpace School, you realize it is remarkably comprehensive.
It really is.
They provide K-12 mental health support directly integrated into Georgia schools. We're talking same-day teletherapy and dedicated therapist teams assigned to specific schools.
And it is designed to dismantle the very barriers that cause that decade-long delay. This is not just some generic counseling hotline.
Right, it's highly specialized.
Exactly. They provide licensed, culturally competent therapists who are specifically ERP trained to offer pediatric OCD-focused care.
So let's look at how this works in practice.
Okay.
A teacher who has been trained by the MentalSpace program to recognize the hidden signs of OCD spots a 7th grader repeatedly tearing up their homework.
The perfectionism red flag.
Right. The teacher refers the student. Now, instead of the parents having to pull the kid out of school, drive across town in the middle of the workday and sit in a waiting room, the child can discreetly go to a private, designated counselor's office during a free period, open a laptop, and engage in specialized teletherapy.
That seamless integration is incredible.
It's huge. And the scope goes beyond just OCD. They offer crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention, staff wellness programs, and family counseling.
All in the same program.
Yeah, and they do all of this while remaining HIPAA and FERPA compliant, meaning both the child's medical privacy and their educational privacy are legally locked down tight.
Which is so important for schools.
Absolutely. There's also a logistical note here for school administrators listening. Partnering with a comprehensive system like this helps schools meet the HB 268 compliant support deadline coming up in July 2026, which relates to state mandates for providing adequate mental health resources.
But the truly revolutionary piece of this model, the mechanism that changes the game for families on a practical level, is the financial structure.
Oh, yeah. We have to talk about the cost.
When we talk about gold standard, specialized treatments like ERP, the biggest barrier for most families isn't just geography, it's cost.
Right. Specialized therapy is notoriously expensive, often completely out of network, and requires navigating an absolute labyrinth of insurance claims.
It's a nightmare for parents. But instead of forcing families into that labyrinth, this model integrates with almost all major commercial insurances in the region. They accept BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, UHC, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, and Amerigroup.
That covers a lot of ground.
It does. But the true game changer, the detail that democratizes this specialized care, is that for families on Medicaid, the out-of-pocket cost is literally $0.
Wow. $0.
Zero. By integrating this into the school day via teletherapy, they completely eliminate the transportation barriers, they wipe out the scheduling conflicts for working parents, and they remove the crushing financial burden of specialized mental health care.
So what does this all mean? When you take specialized ERP-trained therapists, remove the cost barrier entirely for vulnerable families, and plug those experts directly into a child's daily environment, the outcomes must shift drastically.
And looking at the data and the sources, they really do.
Yeah, we are seeing an 89% improvement in attendance, a 92% reduction in anxiety, and an 85% family satisfaction rate. That is the definition of changing a child's trajectory.
It is a profound shift from a reactive mental health system,
Right.
waiting a decade for the family to hit a crisis point, to a proactive, integrated one.
Right.
And its success relies entirely on accurate clinical identification by the adults in that child's life.
Which brings us right back to the core message we need to impart today. We have to look at the clinical takeaway from all these sources. Pediatric OCD is not a phase that a child will just grow out of.
No, it's not.
It is not the result of bad parenting. It is definitely not a child just being difficult or stubborn or overly perfectionistic.
Exactly. It is a highly treatable neurobiological condition.
Yes. There is a clear evidence-based path to recovery through exposure and response prevention, and the data is unequivocal. The sooner ERP starts, the better the outcome.
It demands that we look closer at the children around us. We have to stop accepting surface-level behaviors as quirky personality traits and start recognizing the profound, invisible distress operating underneath them.
For you listening, whether you are a parent watching your child struggle with rigid nighttime routines, an educator wondering why a bright student keeps tearing up their homework, or just someone trying to better understand the immense complexities of the human brain, recognizing these patterns can literally change the course of a child's life.
It really can.
You could be the person who cuts that 10-year delay down to a matter of months.
This raises an important question, though.
What's that?
We spent a lot of time today talking about the paradox of family accommodation, how our natural, deeply well-intentioned instinct to comfort someone we love by throwing water on a grease fire can actually be the exact mechanism that keeps them trapped in a mental health loop.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It is, but it forces us to examine our own behaviors outside of just OCD. Where else in our lives, in our adult relationships, or in our workplaces might our helpful behavior, our desire to constantly smooth things over, remove obstacles, or eliminate someone else's immediate discomfort actually be holding them back from the necessary hard work of growth?
Wow. That is a question that sticks with you. Because at the end of the day, you don't fix a broken alarm system by pretending there's a fire just to make the screaming stop.
Right.
You fix the alarm. Thank you for diving deep with us today.